Moving right along, Team Kaliber. The former squad of Chino, Accuracy, Theory, and Kenny finished stage 1 with 8 wins, which was good enough for 4th place in Division A and that playoff spot. Now, with Accuracy and Kenny returning with Pharaoh and Enable, they will look to win more than that. Benson, over under 8.5 wins.
Under. A couple of reasons. This is a TK squad, like we say every time we talk about them. They started off the year back-to-back championships. Have they looked as good as that since then? No. We talked about the trade and whether we thought the roster move was beneficial. Me and Clint both kind of said, well, we don't think so. You know, this is a team which has had their struggles in the past. And one of the big things I want to point out, and a big emphasis on my entire point here, is Kenny. Now, when we talked about stage 1, you could tell there was a difference in the way Kenny was performing in terms of the opens and his comfortability at stage 1. For me, he is a key factor. He must feel comfortable if they're going to get above that number. But based on everything we've seen so far, I'm under.
I'm actually going to go under as well. And what stood out for me is, like, you look at the old roster and how they started out at the beginning of stage 1. They started out strong, right? I know they slipped off a little bit at the end, but when I look at this new roster, it's hard for me to compare to that championship roster, even to the more recent roster with Methods. Think about this. Methods had the #1 overall respawn KD at stage 1. He had the #3 respawn KD at Seattle, and you lose him. That has got to hurt. Now, is there potential for Enable to get back to a top dominant form that we've seen him in the past? Maybe, but we haven't seen it yet. It is too hard for me to predict them to do very well. So yeah, Ben, I'm going under with you here on Team Kaliber.
Now, Clint, you bring up an interesting point. You said that this roster is dramatically different, not the championship caliber team, but I think to a lot of people on paper, you would say Enable, Pharaoh, they may have more talent than the duo of Theory, of Chino. So I guess, why do you think that?
Did Team Kaliber ever win tournaments because of talent? For me, it was never that. It was always about that clutch factor, that chemistry, losing games when you're getting outslayed. And that's not to call them out as being bad players, but that was never what stood out to me. It was never like, hey, they have the top 4 players in the game, like when you talk about like an Optic when they're winning. It was never that argument. So that's why, I guess, why I feel that way.
Okay, absolutely. So we're going to wrap up Team Kaliber. I'm going to give 2 points to Benson, 1 to Maven. Ben, you get some more points on the board. I think Kenny is the factor here for TK. As soon as the trade made, even with Methods on the team, if you look at Seattle, everybody knew Kenny had to return as that superstar for this team. So a lot of eyes on Kenny in stage 2.